Well, hello, mathematicians. Welcome back. Today we're going to do a fun problem involving ratio. And in this case, we have a couple of different ratios where there is a link between them. So we are going to just dive in. As you can see, the ratio of the number of CDs Brad has to the number of CDs Keith has is 2 to 3. And the ratio of the number of CDs Keith has to the number of CDs Simone has is 6 to 11. Brad has 24 CDs. How many CDs do Keith and Simone have altogether? Well, the first thing we need to do, based on how I taught you to problem solve, is that we find out what we know. And in order to do that, we're going to go ahead and draw some lines underneath the information that we have. First, we know that there is a ratio here of Brad's CDs to Keith's CDs, and that's 2 to 3. And then there's another ratio of Keith's CDs to Simone's CDs, and that's 6 to 11. And then the last piece of information the problem gives us is that Brad has 24 CDs. And finally, we're asked a question, and that is, how many CDs do Keith and Simone have altogether? Well, that actually is the piece that we need to find. So we're at the second point of our star. And the last thing we need to do is figure out what to draw or do in order to get an idea of what we're actually working with. So I want you to think about that for a second and think how you would represent Brad's CDs to Keith's CDs. Well, if you drew a picture that looks something like that, you're on the right track, because the ratio of Brad's to Keith's is 2 to 3, and this is a good representation of it. Now, there's another ratio in the problem, and that's this one here. And we know that Keith is this term, right? Because Brad's to Keith's is 2 to 3. So this 3 is Keith's. And in the second one, Keith is first. So his is this one. That's Keith's and Simone's. This is Brad's, right? So what are we going to do with Keith's CDs? Did the number of CDs he has in his collection magically change? Because we're really talking about relationships between Keith's collection and Brad's and Simone's collection. So in order to compare his to Simone's, did he go out and buy twice as many CDs as he had at first? Or is there a different relationship going on here? What do you think? So if there's a different relationship, is his bar going to be the same, smaller, or larger when we represent it with Simone's CDs? And how do we represent this ratio, 6 to 11, knowing that Keith didn't go out and just double his collection just to compare his CDs to hers? Well, if you drew something that looks like this in order to represent them, you would be on the right track as well. Because Keith's CDs don't change. They are the same number whether you're comparing his collection to Brad's or to Simone's. It's just that the different amount that Brad and Simone have force a different relationship between the numbers. So there is one more piece of information we have to put in here, and that is this, that Brad has 24 CDs. So where might we put that 24? What do you think? Well, if you said we have to represent it with Brad's bar, either here or off to the side maybe, you could have maybe put it right here, but just something indicating that this entire bar is 24 CDs, then you did a good job, all right? So now we've covered everything we know. We also have to put a question mark down, which is how many CDs do Keith and Simone have all together? So now that you have a drawing in front of you, I would like you to put a question mark somewhere that indicates what it is we have to find out in order to answer this problem correctly. Well, if you have a question mark there to encompass both Keith's bar and Simone's bar, you would also be correct. Now, we have everything represented in these models that we have in front of us. And we were given the fact that Brad has 24 CDs. So is there anything we can do with that that's related to the units that are the number of units Brad has? What is each unit worth? Can you tell it? Well, sure. Brad has 2 units, and those 2 units comprise 24 CDs. That means that each unit is 12 CDs, right? 24 CDs in all divided by 2 units is 12 CDs per unit. All right. Every 1 unit is 12 CDs. And that's true for Keith's CDs here. That means that Keith has how many CDs? Well, 3 units is 12 times 3, right? So that's 36. You know that 3 12s are 36. You've known it for a while. Okay, so if we know that Keith has 36 CDs, he has 36 CDs whether they're in relationship with Brad or they're in relationship with Simone. So in this case, we see that there are 6 units. So 36 CDs divided by 6 units gives us 6 CDs per unit in the bottom model. All right, so each of these little guys is 6. And we know that the relationship here was 6 to 11. That means that Simone has 11 units. 11 times 6 is 66 CDs, and that's how much Simone has in all. So now are we able to answer this question mark? Well, sure we can. 36, that's how much Keith has. And 66, which is how much Simone has, is 102, CDs. So Keith and Simone have 102 CDs in all. And you're done. But there are actually several ways to solve this problem, and I would be remiss if we didn't talk about some other ways. Okay? So you have this bar model, right? And there are some relationships here among all of them that are important to note. These units actually are the same no matter which bar you're talking about. Okay, you can see these units here. And so you could actually recognize that Simone has 5.5 of these units, right? So if each unit is 12 and Simone has 5.5 times 12, right? And 5 12s are 60 and half a 12 is 6. 60 and 6 is 66, right? So 5.5 times 12 is 60. And you could do this, if you wanted to say 11 halves. And then multiply and simplify and all the rest, you still wind up with 66, okay? So that's another way to look at it. And guess what? There's even another way to look at this. So let's take a look at the relationship between this ratio and this set of ratios right here, okay? So Brad's to Keith's is 2 to 3. And if we multiply both of these terms by 2, well, 3 becomes 6, and 2 times 2 is 4. So our new relationship is 4 to 6. And we can do that. We can achieve that just by putting some dotted lines down the middle of our bars, right? So that means that Brad now has 4 units and Keith now has 6 units, which is what we saw represented when he's talking about, or when the problem was talking about the relationship of Keith's to Simone being 6 to 11, right? So the ratio now of Brad's to Keith's to Simone's is 4 to 6 to 11. And we knew that Brad has 24 CDs, right? So we could have just drawn 3 models, which is what I would do because, as you know, I like to take the path of least resistance for these things, right? So I would just draw Brad's, Keith's, and Simone's and put 3 units in Keith's and 11 units in Simone's, and then simply draw these dotted lines to indicate that Keith could either be 3 or 6 and Brad could either be 2 or 4, right? And then knowing that there are 24 CDs in Brad's collection, 24 CDs divided by 4 units gives me 6 CDs per unit. And this would be true of everybody's bar, right? So that I would be able to multiply then to get Keith's and Simone's and add them together. And I can do that to find out how many there are in all, right? This question mark now you see in this particular model encompasses everybody's CDs, right? So Brad's is 24. Keith's is 6 times 6, which is 36. And Simone's is 6 times 11, which is 66. And the question mark for how many are in all, and notice that this encompasses, all 3 bars, would be 24 plus 36 plus 66. All right. And we already knew that there were 102 here. So we just add 24 to that and get 126 CDs in all. All righty. Well, that's how you solve it. Actually, 3 ways, but there are more. I wonder if you could find another one and just send me a message of what you think. All right. Well, that's all I got for you. We'll see you again soon.